Hey, hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining today. I'm just setting up. Yeah, okay, off we go. So thanks very much for that, Joseph. And so uh, I hope you can hear me fine. If you have any questions, it's best to leave them in the chat box. Leave them in the chat box and we'll try to get to them later. The webinar today is being recorded. Some of you who have seen my talks before know that my talks are very dense. There's quite a lot of information in them. So do feel free to go back and look at the slides. There's a QR code here, which is probably too small for you to actually get right now. And I'd prefer you to watch rather than actually download the QR code. There's a QR code which you'll see at the end that you can just download, and then you can download also the QR code for the questionnaire. So today I'm going to be talking about choosing the right ER materials. Now, ER, of course, refers to extensive reading. And we're going to be talking about these things here. So let's start off by just reviewing what we need to do for extensive reading. And I'm sure all of you can answer these questions. The first question is, what materials do we use for extensive reading? Do we use storybooks or textbooks with exercises? So for extensive reading, extensive means reading a lot. So of course it would be storybooks. We use storybooks of various kinds. Should the reading be easy or a little difficult? Well, if you want to read a lot, then of course it has to be easy. If it's too difficult, then we're going to slow your reading down, slow down your eye movement and so on, and you'll be actually more studying than reading. And we'll talk more about that later. Should the students be reading quickly or slowly? Well, clearly they should be reading fast and enjoyably, as fast as they can do. And the reason for that is to build reading speed, reading confidence, and reading ability overall. So extensive reading is about practicing the skill of reading, very much like you practice the skill of driving a car, whereas study reading is a different form of reading. And we'll come back to talk about that in a minute. Should we use a dictionary when doing extensive reading? Well, sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's okay. We should try to avoid using dictionaries because that will slow down the reading. If the text is too difficult, it's going to slow down the reading, and that's not what we want for extensive reading. For intensive reading or study reading, dictionary is fine because that has a very different focus, and we're going to look at this difference between the two. So should students be studying the vocabulary and grammar when they read or reading for fun? Well, clearly extensive reading is about reading practice, and reading study is a very different thing. So here, if you look at these sorts of activities, you can see here like a textbook. You can see a teacher is teaching some words here. We've got some vocabulary building activity, teachers talking and explaining things on the board, and so on and so on. And there's reading comprehension questions. We also have students just reading and reading materials. So you can see here there's a difference between the two. There's a big difference between them in the way that we approach reading. The material on the left, sort of textbook material, language study, the vocabulary, looking at the grammar, explaining things. We call this pre-extensive reading or study reading. And the reason we do this is to build the language knowledge to be ready to read fluently. So it has a different purpose from the actual practicing of the skill. So on the left, this is much more language work, and the aim is to build language knowledge. On the right, it's a matter of practicing the skill. So we can make a distinction between learning to read and reading to learn. They're two different things, and we need to be clear about this distinction between the two. So let's now look at what, if we look at the way that students are typically taught to read, they're taught using textbooks, something like this. So a textbook like this would be very typical. You can see it's quite short, maybe 200, 300 words or so. It's got some difficult vocabulary, which is fine. We're trying to teach them. And sometimes we may have a little definition. Following this reading passage, which is usually just one page in a textbook, we would then have some exercises, comprehension exercises, grammar exercises, vocab, and so on and so on. And this is very typical of the way that we teach reading. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with doing this, of course. It's great to do this because we're building language knowledge. However, because this text here has difficult words in it, students are not going to read it quickly. They will not build their reading fluency, their reading speed, and there's not really enough language to meet the vocabulary again and again and again and again. So there's some limitations here. So how do you know if your students are doing extensive reading or intensive reading? So all you need to do is look at your students, and that will tell you, what are your students doing? If your students doing extensive reading or intensive study reading, you just have to look at their hand. So if they're doing study reading, you can see they're probably holding a pencil. If they're doing extensive reading, they're probably holding a book. On study reading, this is all about pen work, filling in exercises, reading things and checking things and writing notes on the book and so on and so on. So they're quite different. So if you don't know if your students are doing study reading or extensive reading, just look at their hand. It will tell you what they're doing. So if we look at that course book, typical course books have a structure like this. You're all familiar with this. They have Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4, and you notice something about this. Each unit has, of course, vocabulary and functions and structures and reading exercises, listening exercises, and so on and so on. You're familiar with this. But I do want to point out something very, very important about this structure when we're teaching using course books. Notice that every unit is different. It has different topic, has different vocabulary. It has different grammar, right? So the be verb here, down here we have got, here we have prepositions, with different functions, different reading skills, and so on. So it's important to notice that each unit has something new. And if we look at this diagrammatically, you can see here that if we have units basically going this way, then in this one we have the be verb and simple adjectives, next unit simple present, past daily routines, and so on. So we've got a particular structure to the way that the courses are being built. And that structure assumes something very important. Because we're looking at new grammar, new vocabulary, new grammar, new vocabulary, new. The constant focus is on new. Notice that this language and vocabulary probably doesn't come later in a unit about information technology. These sporting events are probably not met later in Unit 10, which is about IT. So we have a problem here. And the problem is that the knowledge that we gain in these units over time is going to decrease because this language and vocabulary is not being recycled. It's not being met again and again and again to strengthen and consolidate it. So we have a problem here. The problem is if you're only using textbooks and only doing study reading, because you're constantly focused on new, and you're not focused on recycling, then we are going to see some language loss. So this is another way of looking at it. And this curve is called the forgetting curve. It's called the forgetting curve, and it's very, very well known in educational science. So when we learn something for the first time, we have 100% knowledge. Let's assume the students have met 10 words in their study book and they've learned all of them, but this knowledge is going to be lost. And if the language is not met again in another unit, then of course it will be lost forever. So what we need to do is to make sure that word is met again soon, or that grammar is met again soon, so knowledge goes back. But again, it's going to be lost. And again, they need to bring it back, and so on, yeah? So this first stage is really the textbook, or for example, conscious word learning. So extensive reading and extensive listening build in this extra practice. And that's why it's important to do both the textbook for initial learning, and extensive reading and extensive listening for deepening and strengthening that learning. So these are the reasons we must do extensive reading. Now, when I say we must, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to do so, but somebody in your school must be doing extensive reading as part of the overall curriculum. And these are the reasons here. Provide massive fluent reading practice, and we'll look at later why massive is important. To recycle the important and useful grammar. I said before that it's going to be lost on the forgetting curve if we only do it 1 or 2 times. Therefore, we need to consolidate and strengthen that partly known knowledge, whether it's vocab or grammar or idioms or collocations, it doesn't matter. Build reading speed so you can read naturally, build depth of knowledge, and of course, hopefully to be enjoyable. So when you're approaching extensive reading is a very, very easy thing to do. And a joke that I make sometimes is that extensive reading is very good if you're a lazy teacher. It's your best friend. And of course, I'm joking here, but actually extensive reading at one level is a very easy thing to do. It has 3 basic stages. First, build a library, get the right books, which we're going to talk about today. The students choose, the students read, and then the students share their reading. So all you need to do, once you've built your library, you're done. You just have to watch them read or help and monitor them read, and then check that they're sharing that information through maybe discussion activities or poster sessions or writing reports or some kind of communicative activity to bring the reading into the classroom and use that reading for skill transfer into speaking about your book, therefore listening about your book or writing about your book. So it's very important. Once you've set this thing up, there's not a lot to do. There's no teaching in extensive reading. You don't stand and teach anything on the board. There's no textbook for extensive reading. It's just get the students to read material. So my joke is, if you're a lazy teacher, it's your best friend. So in that sense, it's very easy. These are some of the things that need to be done. You need to get some books, of course, and build your library. Tell the students about the books, what their levels are, what's level 1, level 2, level 3. Help them to find their level. And the easy way to do that is just ask them, pick up a book. Can you read it? And if they can read it, that's their level. And then you just watch them learn. You monitor their learning, make sure they're doing the reading, make sure they're not reading something too difficult, because that becomes study reading, not something too easy, that they're not being challenged. And of course, you have to motivate and encourage them and organize follow-up activities such as discussions, reports, presentations. Now, later, I'm going to talk about this little book. It's called The Guide to Extensive Reading by the Extensive Reading Foundation. It's available on the website. I'll give you the link later. But right at the back here, we have 2 big double pages of post-reading, pre-reading, and while reading activities that you can do for extensive reading. So do check out this book. I'm going to give you a link to it later. You can download. So as a teacher, what do you do? What are the things that you need to be doing to be effective as an extensive reading teacher? Well, you need to check that they're actually reading and they understand why they're doing it. I've already explained about you're going to forget if you only do things once or twice. So they need to also understand this. Even a 7-year-old or 6-year-old can understand. Yeah, they know that we forget. Everybody knows we forget. And if we only do it 1 or 2 times, it's lost. We do know for vocabulary, for example, you need to meet words between 10 and 15 times for them to stay in your head receptively. That doesn't mean you can use them. It means when you see them, you can probably understand what they mean without needing a dictionary. So 10 or 15 times per word. Most textbooks do not recycle anywhere near that amount. So make sure they're reading at the right level. Make sure they understand their books, that they are actually enjoying the books as well. Make sure they're doing enough reading. We're going to talk about how much reading they should do later. And choose the appropriate books at their level, that they can self-monitor. So they're actually, as they're reading, they're thinking, is this too difficult? Is this too easy? Is this boring? Did I understand? So they need to be able to self-monitor themselves, so they know that, okay, I can stop that book, or maybe I need my dictionary, or maybe I need to ask my teacher or something. Yeah. You need to let them know if they face trouble, and make sure they're actually reading, not just, eyes scanning the page without actually just only looking at the pictures, for example. Yeah. And motivated to keep them reading. So motivation is key. And we'll talk later a little bit about the best way to motivate students. So therefore, the student's job is to read the easy books, choose their books, read fluently, build their reading speed, develop the skill of reading, read widely, read in and out of class. In class so you can monitor them, out of class so they can do a lot of practice. They read in English, of course, and they're reading for comprehension and enjoyment. The teacher's job, as I said, is to build the library. So we're going to talk now about what that means. So what should they read? Well, what we do know is if books are too difficult, then the learner doesn't understand, of course, right? Now, if they don't understand, they're going to read slowly. And if they read slowly, they probably don't enjoy the reading. And similarly, therefore, they don't read much. And so we get this negative cycle of reading. So there's a problem if the books are too difficult. However, when the books are easy, the students understand better, therefore they read faster, therefore they enjoy reading, and therefore read more. And it's this cycle we're trying to develop. We're trying to develop this cycle of reading. So the question is, how do you know their level? How do you know what level your students are? Well, the answer is you can't. It's impossible for you to know their level because you cannot open their head and look inside. What we can do is guess. So in extensive reading, we have to trust the students to be able to choose their level of material correctly. And as I said, the best way for them to do that is pick up a book, read 1 or 2 pages, and ask themselves this question: can they read it? That is, can they read something quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension so they don't need a dictionary? If the answer to that is yes, then that book is fine for extensive reading. If the answer is no, it's probably going to be study reading, which isn't a bad thing, but if they're really interested in the topic and they want to read it slowly and carefully, that's fine, no problem. But for extensive reading, which is fluency practice, we need to make sure that they read something quickly and enjoyably with adequate comprehension so they don't need a dictionary. And teaching your students this acronym, READ. Teach your students to think about this. Remind them when they're choosing books, are you reading, students? READ. What was R? What was E? What was A? And so on. So they think and monitor what they're choosing, okay? So we need to understand when we're choosing materials to build our library, and students need to understand when they are choosing materials for themselves, that there's a relationship between comprehension and speed. Now, sometimes the material is very difficult. It's slow and intentional reading. It's quite high effort. Probably you need a dictionary, often loss of comprehension, and sometimes is demotivating. This is text which is too hard. We also have text which is a little bit slow. There are quite a few pauses. Maybe you lose comprehension and you need your dictionary quite a lot. And the last type of reading is fast, fluent reading with very few pauses, high comprehension, high involvement and engagement in the story, and you're lost in the flow of reading. So we have names for 3 different types of reading. This one we call reading pain. And I hope that none of you ever give students material which is too difficult, that they're just lost in their dictionaries, they're demotivated, and they just get the message that English is difficult. So please avoid this. Now, this one here is at the instructional level. This is the level of reading where they already know quite a lot, but there's some grammar and vocabulary that they don't, maybe some concepts that they don't. And this is the study reading I talked about before. So we know here that if the students are reading a text which has more than 2 or 3% of the words that are not known, that is 98, 97, 98% of the language is known, and 3% is not known, that's probably intensive reading. For extensive reading, it needs to be higher, 98, 99%, so they can read quickly and smoothly. So 1 word in 50. Sometimes people call the 5-finger rule. 5 unknown words on the page, it becomes study reading. So it's important to understand it should have very, very high coverage. Only 98, 99% of the words should already be known so that they can build speed and build connections between words. So when we're choosing materials, there's basically 4 types of materials to choose from, 4 genres of material to choose from. The first type we call decodable readers or phonics readers, yeah? And these are for systematic practice of specific sounds and sight words, matching sounds with letters and matching words with pronunciation. And this type of decodable reader often has very clear practice. So things like, it may have a sentence like, open the box, said the fox, put it in the taxi. And here you can see that they're clearly focusing on the X or the X sound, yeah? So that's the decodable reader. And here's some examples. My name is Kate, I hate to be late, I race to make first base, I fix my lace. So here you can see they're definitely focusing on the A sound and the different spellings, ATE, ACE, ASE. So you're trying to practice. This is clear focus on patterns and so on, yeah? So that's one type of reader. The next type of reader are we call level readers. And these type of readers are for native, often K-12 schools in the US or wherever. And they're built in a series, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these books are designed to build pattern recognition and sight word and build vocabulary. So this is not really about phonics and not really about sound so much. It's more about patterns. So here you may have a sentence like, look at the cat, look at the dog, look at the bird, look at me. So again, you can see repeated patterns trying to strengthen that, yeah? And here's an example. They are in mud, they are in shoes, they are in. So these are the words that we're focusing on this type of book. Here's another example. This is the blanket from grandma. This is the something from. So again, this is very much about practicing grammar patterns, building vocabulary with grammar, seeing how they fit together. These are very much study materials, very much on the study end of the scale. The next type of reader that you could choose are standalone native materials or unsimplified materials. This is where you go to the bookstore and you go and find some materials which native children would read. So a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old would read. And you just pick them. So examples are Cat in the Hat or Very Hungry Caterpillar, Peter Rabbit, Harry Potter. So you would choose books that native children would read and then give those to your students. So this is a third type of material. So this is typically what you find if you go to a bookstore. These are the types of books that you would typically see. Okay, so the native books written for US children and UK children, for example, is, for example, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, there are millions and millions of these available. They're very high interest and they're very engaging and they are very, very suitable for US and UK children, right? That's who they're written for. However, in EFL, remember, we're in a different environment. In America and the US, the children have English, they already have mastered several thousand words and most of the important grammar before they even start to read one word in English. They already have a huge amount of knowledge before they start reading at age 3 or 4. So for native children, because they already know the words and they can recognize pictures of, say, animals or objects, For them, the reading experience is very, very different from a child who only meets English once or twice a week. Because the native children are able to draw on all of that knowledge, and all they're really doing is matching a spelling to a sound or a sentence that they already know. So we have to be very clear here that native materials, unsimplified materials, are designed for native children. They're not designed and might not be suitable in an EFL environment, because the EFL environment is very different. The problem with these types of books is they're all standalone. They're not written in any form of series. There's no systematic syllabus with them. Each book has its own random vocabulary. So book A is not connected to book B, is not connected to book C. The grammar and vocabulary in one book is not connected to the next one. Remember, we talked about our forgetting curve? Yeah, if you have new book, new book, new book, new book, you're not going to build and strengthen your vocabulary well. Yes, they're very interesting, but they're not usually built as a system. They're not really leveled in any way that ELT understands. Students need to know they're moving from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. And these books are not leveled in any way like CEFA levels or intermediate, beginner, advanced, TOEIC levels, and so on. So they're not leveled in any way that the students understand. And as I said, these native materials assume prior knowledge of thousands of words in grammar before you even start. So please be very careful about using these materials. And I think it's important to understand that reading is more than just processing words or answering questions. Now, I've talked to many teachers around the world who believe that materials written for natives are absolutely fantastic for their students. I know many teachers who say that. However, when you actually talk to the students and you ask them about what they've read, often their comprehension's not really very good, and they can't do much with their reading. It's very important to understand that reading is more than just processing words and more than just being able to answer comprehension questions, because comprehension questions is only at this very low level. Where did Jack go? What did Jack do? Who went to the zoo? Right? That's this level. Doesn't necessarily mean you understand. It doesn't mean you can apply the knowledge. It doesn't mean you can analyze the text, evaluate it, or even be creative with it. So this taxonomy of lower order thinking skills to higher thinking order skills, right? If the text is too difficult, even if the students are processing the words, does not mean they're going to have this type of knowledge. So it's extremely important to remember this. And I'll give you an example of this. So if you look at a typical book like this one, so we're almost home, said Arthur, too bad. You only read 8 words, no ice cream today for you. Hold your horses, said DW. I spy, said ice cream. I spy ice cream. Hot dog, I read 10 words, yeah. Now, all of those words, probably your students know. They know the word horse, they know the word dog, they know the word ice cream, and so on, yeah? But look at this. Do you think your student can guess what that means if they're, let's say, 6 or 7 or 8 years old? Do they know this game, I Spy? There's a game that children play in English, is I spy with my little eyes, something beginning with da-da-da-da, and you have to guess what your partner said, right? Young American British kids know this game. Maybe kids in your area don't. Hot dog, right? Are they thinking this dog? Are they thinking something that's eating? No, it actually means well done or hooray. That's what it means. Will your students be able to guess this? They will probably only just be able to read the words, but are like, huh? Hold a horse? Spy? Like 007? Spy ice cream? What? Hot dog? There's no hot dog here. So they're going to lose comprehension. So be very careful about using text like this. So Webb and McAllister researched whether text written for children is suitable for L2 extensive reading. They compared native adult materials, native children materials, and graded readers. And they found that for material written for natives or materials written for children, natives, contain roughly the same difficulty of words. That is, books by, say, Dan Brown are equally as difficult as The Hungry Caterpillar in terms of vocabulary, and were largely inaccessible to non-natives. They found that the graded readers were significantly more accessible. So one reason for that is if you look at the vocabulary in book, for example, the Frankenstein book here, if we compare the vocabulary in the native book and the vocabulary in the graded reader, which is the red one, has lots and lots of high frequency words, very few low frequency words. But you'll notice in Frankenstein, there's a lot of very rare words, and that's why they're trouble for students. Yeah. So be very careful about using native materials unless your students are very high level. So let me just drive home this point a little bit more. I would like you to read this text. As you read the text, we're going to then look at some questions. So this is a short text about the Snolls. Please read this. So the grifty Snolls cloppered grouchingly along the untroughed shake. They were clary, so they higgled on spretly. Ah, chiva cave, they squawked hoply. Me pasa quodge. Quodge, snilled one, and flitted even jucklier. Now, I'm able to read every word there. Where did the Snolls clopper? Along the untroughed trake. What was the trake like? Well, we know trake would be a noun. Therefore, we're looking for what was it like is probably an adjective. So a trake is an unchuffed trake. Why did they higgle on? And the key here is here. The reason. This is the reason. They were clary, so they higgled on. Why did they higgle on? They were clary. Where were they going? And you can see capital letter quodge. Now, you can see here that it's possible to answer the comprehension questions using grammatical knowledge. But you have no idea at all what the text means. But you can still read it. We have to be very careful that we're getting material that students actually can process at higher than understanding level, at the applying level, at the analyzing level. If your students are stuck here, then they're going to be just like you, answering the questions, getting 100% on the test, but you have no idea what you're reading. So we have to be very, very careful about using native level materials. So when choosing materials, we need to have some principles in mind. The materials, are they at a suitable reading level? Are they enjoyable and engaging? Do they systematically recycle previous language? Are they helping to build reading speed and fluency and building on previous knowledge? So if we go back to the textbook, which is introducing language, what we need to do is have reading materials which systematically recycle this grammar and vocabulary. Not this one, not yet. This comes later. We just want to read lots of books at this level to become strong and really good foundation. When they have read, say, 10, 15, 20 books at this level, they then move up to the next level because these books now have this grammar and vocabulary plus this grammar and vocabulary. So we're building on previous knowledge systematically. And similarly, level 3 books will have this grammar and vocabulary plus this grammar and vocabulary. So we need to have this systematic vocabulary. This is really important in an EFL environment because the students do not have English outside the classroom. In America, in Australia, they do have English outside the classroom. They don't need this systematic building of knowledge. Yeah. So let's just look now at the type of materials that are available. I'm going to show you the materials are called graded readers. These are written for foreign language learning. They are based on headwords. They have beginning level and CEFL levels and so on. They're written within headwords, which is like a dictionary entry. They have a particular grammar syllabus, which mirrors the textbooks. And they also have glossaries, sometimes a CD and activities. So graded readers are graded from phonics level all the way up to native books. And the idea here is that the target is to read these books. So in order to do that, we need to build up by going through various systems. Start with phonics, start with easy readers with easy vocabulary and grammar. Then you move up, then you move up, then you move up, then you move up, and eventually get to here like steps. Yeah. So we need to make sure they're graded up to this. And you need to find out where your students are. Please do not start here. So if we look at the eFuture materials, for example, they have a framework here, and you can find this in eFuture materials. And I'm just showing you here how one system works. Now, eFuture materials are excellent materials. And I just want to introduce you to the various series that they have. And here you can see they have books from kindergarten to elementary to secondary, and they go from starter level all the way up to level 12, from books with only 200 different words, 250 different words, and so on, all the way up to these books right the way up here. Yeah. So there's lots of different series here, and let's just very quickly look at each of them. Now, I'm showing you the eFuture ones here, but of course, many publishers have their own series. And the eFuture series is excellent. It's often winning international awards for the quality of their readers. So let's just look very quickly. We start off with the Little Sprout Readers. And there's quite a lot of stories here, the Little Sprout Readers. I'm going to go through this quickly. Please get the eFuture catalog and have a look at them in detail. Yeah. The next one is Smart Phonics Readers. And we have some introduction here. Again, you can look at these slides later, go through them in detail later. Smart Phonics Readers look like this. Then we have Phonics Fun Readers. So these are very, very early language-focused materials. And they look like this. Then we have Classic Readers. So these are low level with very systematically recycled language. There's 120 books of classic stories. And these are some of the classic stories that you will see. We have Classic Readers at secondary level. So these are for higher level students. And you can see here, the books look a little bit different. They're famous classic stories, usually retellings of famous books like White Fang or Rip Van Winkle and so on and so on. Then we have a series of comic books, Magic Adventures. And we also have Vera the Alien Hunter is another series. And School Adventures is another series. And then we have Art Classic Stories. There's 30 of these books. And again, you can see these classic stories are there. And PYP Readers is another set for low level to high level students. Yeah. And there is Smart Tree, which also has some reading materials and some big news. eFuture are soon going to be releasing a digital platform for reading materials. So they're going to tell you more about that later. So there's more reading materials on the way. So this is very typical of many publishers, the type of reading materials that they introduce. And you can see here, as I said, they have levels. The books are specifically written with levels in mind, and that the students should be able to pick and choose where they are. So students, if they're elementary level, should be choosing some of these books. If they're secondary level, and this is their English level, they should be choosing some of these books, right? So they should learn to read by their levels, okay? So that's how to know. If your students are here, you should buy books in this level. If your students are here, you should buy books in this level. So let's look inside the materials. So the very easiest level has very few words, not much going on. The next level has slightly longer sentences, have speech, for example, a bit of dialogue. The next level, elementary, is longer. Now we have paragraphs, a little bit more complex vocabulary, a little bit more complex grammar. Next level up, full paragraphs, more informational, fewer pictures, some difficult words are being taught, and so on. We get to the advanced level where we have very few pictures, yeah? So the material gets increasingly more difficult depending on the level of the student. So if we look, for example, at this series, you can see it starts with the characters and some key vocabulary. We then have the story itself. At the end of the story, there's a little playlet, a little play for the students to practice, and they can retell the story. This is a good way to recycle the story, and the students can act out the play in class. And there's also a story review where maybe they can talk about the story themselves. There's some prompts here, and there's a list of all the books, and if you want, there's a CD available for these books as well. So when you're choosing materials, we need to decide if you're going to have a beginning level or an advanced level. So we start with phonics, we move to the rhyming books and the decodable books, we move up to graded readers, and then unsimplified materials. Most of your students are probably here, somewhere around here. So graded readers are really, really important for this, yeah? Notice there's a lot more language control here at this level, and up here there's much less language control, more unsimplified, a little bit more random input, where this is still quite controlled in many ways, designed to be controlled. So I have a quiz for you. So I want you to think about how much reading the students need to do. Well, how many words do you think students need to meet to learn enough English that they can get into a good university? So if they're going to Seoul University, or they want to go into Tokyo University, they want to go to big universities in South America or in all over the world, how many words do they need to meet so that they can build up enough knowledge so they can get to, let's say, advanced level, where they'll be able to get to a good school? Next question, how many different words are in a typical middle school textbook? How many different words? Third question, how many total words will students meet if they only read textbooks? Okay, well, we know to get to the advanced level, students need to meet about 5 million words. And now I can explain the math of this later. It's to do with how often words are met. We know the frequency of how often words occur, and we know that words need to be met between 8 to 15 times. But we also know that it's not just meeting that word, it's also meeting its collocation, meeting the word with multiple meaning senses, meeting the derived forms of the words like useless, using, and uselessness, disuse. So all of those derived forms need to be learned, the idioms they occur in, the phrasal verbs they occur in, the lexical patterns they occur in, all of that needs to be met, and it's part of that 5 million words. So how many different words are there in a typical book? It's about 1,000. 1,000 different words in a middle school textbook series. Let's say 3 years of books. If you just take 3 years of books like this, add up the total number of different words, it's 1,000 different words, that's all. How many total words would they meet by the end of high school? That's 3 years of middle school, 3 years of high school, all of those textbooks added together. How many total words is that? It's only 100,000. 1/50th of what they need. So clearly we have a problem here. So one reason that graded reading is really useful is that if you have the extensive reading materials, each book is 1,500 or 5,000 words long when they get to the elementary level or above. Some of them are up to 20,000 words. So if the students are reading 1 or 2 books a week, they are basically reading the equivalent of 1 textbook per week. It's about the same. So if they're reading 1 book a week, only 1 book a week, it's the same for reading for 1 month is the same as reading that. If they're reading 1 book a week for 52 weeks, it's the equivalent of 12 course books. So we can see here, there are huge benefits for extensive reading. And 1 story is only about an hour, 40 minutes, something like that. So how much reading should students do? Well, we know beginners need at minimum an hour a week at their ability level. Why do we say that? Because we know that how frequent certain words occur, we know how often they need to be met, and we know how quickly they're going to be forgotten. So we need to balance, when do we need to meet the language again before it's lost and we need to meet it again, right? Before it's lost, when do we need to meet it again, right? And for beginners, because of the structure of English, it's about an hour a week with at their ability level. Intermediate's about the same. Intermediate books are a little bit thicker. They're reading a little bit faster. So it's still about an hour a week of reading will get you, at minimum, will be able to maintain or maybe slightly increase your vocabulary. It'll prevent forgetting. These are figures that allow preventing of forgetting. It doesn't mean language growth. This means preventing forgetting. This is the minimum. That's why it's minimum. Advanced learners, sorry, different story. For advanced learners, they need to meet more language, because the thing is, when you read an advanced level book, you already know so much language that you have to read more to find things that you don't know. So advanced learners need at least 2 or 3 hours a week at their ability level. So we know from extensive reading that it really, really benefits. And let me show you a little piece of evidence for this. So I researched some years ago about all of the texts in a particular language course. And I analyzed the 3 course books. This is for the Mexico market. Some of the words in the course books were met more than 50 times. Some words were met 30 to 49 times, some were 20 to 29, and so on and so on. So in the course books, they met 3,000 different words, right? There was a total of 200,000 words in these books. 523 words were met more than 50 times. 210 words were met between 30 to 49 times, and 229 words were met between 20 to 29. So we can probably say at the end of the course that these words are known. There was another 472 and 580 words which are probably partially known, not quite ready yet for use in speaking, but about 40% of the words were probably going to be completely forgotten. So I then thought, okay, what do we do? What will happen if we add 1 graded reader per week? How much extra input would that be for the students? So here we now have the figures. So what we see here is this vocabulary moves across here. What's happening is, by adding the reading, these words now move to the probably known category. And these words probably move to the partly known vocabulary. So we can see a big jump in numbers here. So I then said, what happens if you do 2 reading books a week? And again, you can see that this vocabulary is moving and this vocabulary is moving across. So basically, if you compare course book only or course book plus 1 or 2 graded readers, effectively it's doubling the student's vocabulary. I'll say that again. By adding 1 or 2 graded readers per week, it effectively doubles the student's vocabulary. So please get some reading done for the students. So where do you start? Well, you should start with a needs analysis. You need to find out who exactly are your students. What's their language background? What are their worries? And what are their fears about language learning? What are their interests in? Yeah. How much and what English do they know? What are they interested in? What topics they're interested in? Because you need to get the material that they're interested in. If they're interested in skateboarding, please find something about skateboarding if you can. Yeah. How much can you ask them to read? Do they have enough free time to do 30 minutes a week, or an hour, or 2 hours, or 3 hours? How much time do they actually have to read? And how much English outside your class do they get? Do they have another class that's outside your school? And you need to think about the own reading program that you have now. Does your current reading program develop their reading ability now? I'm talking about the fluency. Is your current program focused on study reading or extensive reading? So you need to analyze, where are we now? So when you're then building a library, make sure you get books that build variety, a balance of fiction and non-fiction, many different topics, of course, meet the goals of the program. So maybe to build general English, or maybe it's build business English. I don't know what your goals are. Make sure the books are interesting to the students. Make sure you have books at very many different levels. If you're not sure, my advice is go low. Everybody is a beginner sometime. Okay. Make sure the books can be read fluently. That is, buy a few books, show them to your students and ask them, can you read this book smoothly and easily? If they say yes, buy more of those books. So if you can, take the student to the bookstore and ask them to see what they can read. And make sure the books are designed to systematically build on previous knowledge. And if you don't know, honestly, ask the students. They will surprise you with the types of books and things that they want to read. Yeah, we can't sometimes guess. So when you're building an extensive reading program, there's some important things to remember. Developing fluent reading ability takes time. Developing a sense of language takes time. Unlearning old habits takes time, and developing reading confidence takes time. Please do not expect instant results in a week, a month, even a year. This is a long-term project. Extensive reading should be continuous throughout the curriculum. It shouldn't be something we do one semester and drop. No, it should be continuous for the reasons I mentioned before about making sure the words and vocabulary come back again and again. We're building on previous knowledge. Yeah. So don't expect too many gains in one semester. If you measure their pre-reading ability, one semester of reading, measure their reading ability again, you probably will not see a lot of difference. Over a year, yes. Over 3 years, absolutely, definitely. So how do you find time in your curriculum for this? Well, put the books on their desks, get them to leave their books there. If the students have a bit of spare time, then just get them to read, or get them to read before you enter the class. Start a reading club, make the reading homework, or make the textbook the homework and read in class, and they can share their activities in class. So there's lots of ideas. As I said, in this book here, there's many, many different things that you can do. Yeah. So, but job number one is, if you don't have extensive reading in your program, speak to your course designer to get extensive reading in. Yeah. I'm going to take about maybe 2 more minutes. Yeah. So your next steps, try extensive reading with a few students informally, get some feedback and find out what books they like. Next stage, ask for a budget for a trial class. Start the ER with just one class. See how it goes. Make your mistakes. And then later expand and apply to go to your whole school. So please don't hurry these steps. Learn how to do extensive reading. And there's lots and lots of places that you can learn how to do that. Yeah. So when you're building your library, it's a good idea to put the books into some kind of level. So I put color codes on our books. We know the brown books are the easiest. And so students can very quickly see what the books are, what level they are, and try and keep some kind of a record of what they've been reading. And make sure that they know what the graded readers are. So this is for my university here. So I mentioned before, this book, Guide to Extensive Reading, is available in many, many, many different languages, including Korean and Spanish, Amharic, Thai, Arabic. So please go to the ER Foundation and download this free guide to how to do extensive reading. And it also has extensive reading activities in here as well. If you want to learn more, there's an extensive reading podcast. There's also a YouTube channel. The ER Foundation has a YouTube channel with hundreds of videos on extensive reading. And also, if you want to learn about you're a very beginner for extensive reading, I recommend these 2 presentations which I made. One is the absolute basics. So this is about 45 minutes. And this is how do we do extensive reading with no money and few resources. So here are some advice videos for you that you can just watch on YouTube anytime. And one more thing to mention, next month on August the 5th to the 7th, we have the Extensive Reading Around the World online conference for students from some countries. It's $20 from richer countries. From other countries, it's only $5 for 3 days. So please go to this link and go and find out more. If you want to learn more about extensive reading, you want to ask some questions, this is a great place to go. And here is your QR code. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Dr. Waring. That was a very informative presentation that you gave. I think we have a little bit of time for some questions. So if anybody has,
if they have a question, they can put it in there. I'm glad to see that students were writing the answers to some of the comprehension questions in the SNOLs, right? Grifty SNOLs. Yeah. But I think my point there is that, you know, we don't assume that because students are processing the text and they're answering comprehension questions, that means they actually understand. It's very easy to forget and choose the wrong material and ask them, do you understand? Yeah. They might understand the comprehension questions because they've looked at the pictures. So be very careful.
Sure.
Any questions, anybody?
If I may ask a quick question, maybe
go ahead, Joseph.
Slightly casual question, but what can you think of the book, like the very first book that you read that really like stuck with you?
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I think there was a book that I read. It was I forgot the title of it now. Maybe somebody can remind me. It's a book about some boys who were trapped on an island and there was a plane crash, and the boys were trapped there, and they sort of had to learn to cooperate together. I can't remember. I'm sure somebody remembers the name. Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies.
Oh, Lord of the Flies. Now that book really impacted me, and it was I don't know why. It was a very negative emotion too, because I'd never thought about the way that kids react towards each other. And so on. So it's very, that was the most impactful story for me, I think, yeah. But actually, I don't get a chance to read very much. I read much more academic stuff than I do literature. Yeah. Sure. So I have a question here. What's better for school students, true, false, or long answers? Okay, thanks, Boris. I think that's going to depend on what you want to find out. I think true, false answers, it's going to depend on the questions that you ask. If you're doing like general comprehension questions, I think that would be fine to do true and false. Long answers are going to get a bit more information from them. I would probably suggest longer answers. But my question is, why are you testing them? If they've chosen a book, remember READ, can they read something enjoyably with adequate comprehension so they don't need a dictionary? If they've already selected a book that they can read, do you need to test them? Maybe you just need to check they've read it and check that they understood it, but you probably don't need to test them on it, I would suggest, yeah? I'm not saying no assessment, but we have to be careful. It's not necessary to just keep asking questions and questions. And there's two reasons for that. One of which is it takes a lot of time. And also, of course, how are you going to make questions for everybody's book if everybody's reading something different? So there's a website that you can use, which is called amreader.org. This website has quizzes for literally thousands of books, graded readers, including the eFuture readers. And if you want to have comprehension questions, that's fine. My advice is probably the problem with answering comprehension questions and things like MReader is under pressure situations, students are probably going to cheat, right? They'll get their friend to take the quiz or they'll swap the answers and so on, yeah? I would suggest if you want to assess them, don't assess them with a score on the reading. Assess them on the task that follows the reading. Assess them on their ability to talk about their book or present about their book. And that shows that if you're giving them something to do, that they've actually read it and actually understood it. If you're just giving them a comprehension questions like MReader, as I said before with the SNOLs, you may not know if they understand or not. So I think assess them with the task after the reading rather than assess them on do they actually understand the story at all. If they can talk about the story, then clearly they've understood it, I would say, yeah. Placement test to analyze their ability. I would probably say the best placement test is just they pick up a book and can they read it? READ. I don't think you need a placement test. It might be possible, but I would suggest that placement tests are probably not necessary, because the real test, as we saw with the Grifty Snolls, is they can answer the questions, but do they understand, right? So I think it's much better that you move away from testing and move a lot more towards enjoyability, motivation, sharing the reading. I think that's far more important than just giving the message of like, read and test, read and test, read and test, read and test, because that just feels like school. It doesn't build that lifelong habit of reading. So I think move away from assessment of direct books, move to assessment of the task that follows the book. Yeah. Extensive reading, first time English learners. Yes, it is, but you need to build that language knowledge first. You can't really read fluently until you've learned, say, 200 or 300 words, a little bit of the grammar. There are some books out there which have only, let's say, 2 or 3 words on a page. That's possible. So you can start from very low levels. I know students who are starting extensive reading only 1 month into their English study. Now, will they be reading fast and fluent? No, but they're actually reading books. So my advice would be for you to read to the students. So have a class, have all the students sit around and you can read to the class if it's kids, not if it's businessmen, of course. But I think that would be possible, yeah. So you can show them a book and let them choose it. Yes, Diane, yes. I would say, look, here's the library. Don't forget READ. Can you read it with adequate comprehension? It's enjoyable and so on, yeah? And if they can answer yes, that book is for you. And then I would get them to sit down and read quietly, and you go round the class just checking, hey, how's your book? Is it okay? Is it too difficult? What's it about? Oh, who's this in the book? I know. So if they finish the book, you can ask them, was it a happy ending, a good ending? Did you enjoy the story? Did you not enjoy? Just monitor whether they're struggling or not. And it'll take probably a few months for them to feel about the right kind of material, because a lot of students they have this belief that the reading has to be difficult because I need to learn new stuff, which is a mistake. The reading should be easy so they can deepen and strengthen previous knowledge, where they can see the words again and again, match idioms with and learning idioms, learning collocations, matching the grammar and the vocabulary. It's all about building depth of knowledge, not about building new knowledge. Okay, so be careful about that. And thank you very much, Sue, for putting the eFuture catalog up there. If you do have any more questions you want to ask me, this is my email. Please feel free to email me and ask me any question. And hopefully, if you can join the Extensive Reading Around the World conference, then you can, there'll be question time there, and I will go through some of the basics of extensive reading. There'll be about 800 or 900 teachers there over the 3 days. So lots and lots of places for you to get advice and to participate. There's also a photo competition. If you want to take a photo of your students reading in class, and you can maybe win a prize for the best photos. So please have a look. The eFuture will be at Extensive Reading Around the World as well. That's excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry, about 4 minutes over. Sorry about that, Joseph.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And of course, Dr. Waring has done several of these webinars with eFuture. All of those are available on our YouTube page. So if we couldn't get to your question today, maybe some of those other presentations have the answer that you're looking for as well. So
right.
Thank you.
Those, I did one on motivation for you. I did one on building an ER library and how to do extensive reading activities. They're all available on your YouTube channel.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much.
See you at Extensive Reading Around the World. Take care then. Bye-bye.
Bye.